quest to break, to bind, and sever all the chains, the doubt and veils that leave me blind, as we walk along through crooked path and leave this world behind.
My God, I am here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Welcome to another recording. Actually, I didn't say recording. It's an episode. Whatever it is, you know what I'm talking about. I am here, Leonok, your host of this lovely little thing we have going on here called Myths and Magic. A special show where I talk about everything under the occult, the theories behind it, how the magic works, and theoretically speaking. I can't speak today. I did some things last night. And of course, I'm here joined with my lovely co-host, Grimmy. Hello, Grimmy. I know he's so adorable. I love him. So I'm so happy because I'm here, bringing to you another show, bringing to you another morsel, a delectable taste of my madness. And so I am so happy because I think the topic I'm going to talk about today in this video is going to be something that I think not a lot of practitioners or even other kinds of, practitioners or people even think about really when it comes to the things that they do in their daily life and the things that can affect our practice. Because I've noticed it, I feel like there's sort of like this lull in the wave here of magic. And yes, we had this whole thing with the retrogrades, the planets being in retrograde. I think they're maybe coming out of it or so. Almost all of them except Mars, I think is what I heard, which could be, a sign of something. I don't know what it is. I'm not an astrologer by any means. Do I really believe in that sort of thing? I can understand the theories and beliefs behind it. It's a lot more complicated and in-depth than what people make it out to be. A lot of what you are exposed to, especially in daily media, is the extremely basic and non-informed aspects of astrology. All of it. It's an extremely in-depth type of practice and discipline that requires you to not only analyze the planets, the stars, the formations, but I believe what sort of quadrants they are, the moon, the rooms that they are in comparison to their signs, and I think whatever aspects or things are. I think honestly what I should do is I should honestly talk to somebody else that's a lot more knowledgeable in this sort of factor, but I believe I need to put it perhaps a chart of some kind, maybe one of my own making, and then I would probably go into the details. However, do I have the time for it? Not as much as I used to, unfortunately. These videos are becoming a bit infrequent just because of the nature of my job. I work at the portals still because I need to have sort of monthly income. This isn't my end-all be-all source of income, of monetary gain. So I have to do these sort of things in order to keep the sort of thing rolling. And I'm doing this for fun because I have the general need to inform all of those who, don't really consider these things sort of logical or perhaps, even meaningful in any way. But when we consider aspects or, things of the occult, the reason why they mean so much to so many people is because they have these sort of anecdotal truths, I guess, to some, but they sort of offer something that perhaps something in the mundane doesn't really, or perhaps what they're looking for is something they can normally find in the mundane realm. So I guess took it upon myself to sort of just, inform these sort of things, to put things out there for people to look at, for people to analyze, to see if I maybe got some things right or wrong. Please tell me why. Comments are there for a reason. No one's really using them. However, if I did this correctly, if you found perhaps an email of some kind, feel free to do that. I am in the process of, bettering myself as an occultist, and that involves me understanding more about the craft, understanding more behind the theories behind the craft, understanding more of the UPGs associated with certain practices, and of course, growing in my own, personal power and knowledge, which is what I urge all of you to do. To sort of, grow in your power, in your worth, in your authenticity as a being on this planet that is capable of, interacting with so many other things that spirits cannot normally do. And so all of the things that I'm doing, yes, it is intentional, but it is something that I am trying to sort of, I can't really find the words to describe, sort of, pull myself into, to sort of embrace this sort of thing, and to sort of, put into the minds of everyone else that this is something that can be completely legitimate and normalized within our society. And in some cultures it absolutely is, but unfortunately we live in a day and age where things are sort of, conflicting with that sort of thing. The inherent hold that religion has had over the general population a very long time has had some pretty negative effects, as we've seen in today's age, things like religious trauma, which isn't something I'm going to really go into. Issues within the family, as well as within their friend groups or community, people that sort of, dive so deeply into this sort of belief system, that they sort of reject the reality that is outside of the one that they themselves have created within this sphere. Could we have done the same thing? Absolutely. But I think an effective occultist is one that is able to operate in both realms of reality. That is why we are so special. That's why witches and, mages or whatever you call yourselves are very special, because you are individuals, we are individuals that operate in two planes or perhaps three planes or more of existence. And I feel as though it is important for us to not only, understand reality as it is in the natural world, as we see it, how others see it, and the ones that we have formed ourselves or ones that we found ourselves in. So, there are two, discerning factors, things that all of us need to sort of, really put into our minds to understand and to really, hash out. Okay, so there's a lot of things happening within the magic community. For people are discovering themselves as sort of like this weird lull, I think, in the magical waves. People are sort of trying to, understand a bit more, know their origins, know their roots, which are very important. A tree without its roots cannot stand. It doesn't really have any foundation to nourish itself on. So it's important to know where we came from, how these things have affected the culture that we live in, that affected our lives in return, and to understand how these sort of origins affect our practices now, upon us discovering more about where these sort of things came from, whether or not something is legitimate or wrong. What I will say, and this sort of leads into the topic of this video, is that a lot of things that perhaps may be discussed or believe, may be thought about, I'm not going to go into too depth in this video perhaps, because this one's sort of just throwing together, but there is what I have in mind to put in, because I feel like it would put a lot of our practices and how we see the world, our worlds, in perspective. Because as much as we would like to, imagine things, talk about things like UPG, things that work for us, we also have to come to mind that we could be mistaken or wrong. And these sort of things can lead to different thoughts and processes that can then affect our spiritual practices as well as our, mundane practices. And with that, the subject of this video is going to be titled Weaknesses. Weaknesses within the craft, within our minds, how they affect us, and how what I'm going to say can be a type of power we can then use for ourselves. The most important thing about practitioners is that we have the ability to use almost anything to our advantage, things that can lend us power when things weaken us. The reason why I gave that preamble before talking about the weaknesses here is that I feel like a lot of the power and the motivation we gain as practitioners is something that comes from anecdotal experiences in regards to spiritual events, in regards to evidences that we use to solidify and to support the ideas that we have behind these UPG events. I feel as though it is important for us to understand that, the reality that we live in is one that we see, one that we feel. There are some things that are not real, things that can indeed be projections of our mind upon our reality to sort of make sense of everything, to sort of, give us a general, good feeling. It's something similar that you see from people that sort of disassociate or that sort of, get kicked out of previous religious organizations, things and lives that they live in. It is a type of spirituality, but people don't, I guess, understand that religion is a form of spirituality. It's a spiritual practice that someone has. Some religions can be extremely mundane, and so then just becomes a regular lifestyle. But for the other ones, there's this sort of little niche where it just sort of becomes, a spiritual thing. A spiritual lifestyle, which is what, a lot of practitioners do on a daily basis. We convene with spirits, we analyze the sort of energies that are there in the world, things that we can use for our benefit or for the benefits of others. And, doing things in a way that can help take care of those sources of our energy, sources of our power, because if they're lacking, and if we're relying on them for this power, then we will find ourselves lacking. Weaknesses can be something that is very important to understand, because understanding your weakness as a practitioner, it's important for you to understand what gives you power, what gives you strength, and what sort of things to avoid or embrace to maybe adopt a different type of power or to transform your power as a practitioner. If you, for example, are, for example, a Christian witch of some kind, and those things do exist. Those people exist out there. Because when you think about the nature of, the Bible, the Christ, or whatever it is, as a lot of spiritual elements, you're essentially adopting a type of deity or a patron that, to your belief, or perhaps to whatever reality we find ourselves in, is capable of, immense power. And for those of us who are perceptible, or who allow themselves to become susceptible or sensitive to this type of energies, can harness that and can sort of, do things in place to, promote a sort of bridge that allows the energies to travel from there to here. And it's a lot of things that a lot of practitioners do in concerning with deities, which you don't really have to involve yourself in, but even in a little bit slight mundane sense, in a non-deistic sense. Understanding this will sort of affect our psychology and can then affect how we see the world. When you realize that a lot of, these passages in scripture were inspired by either Mesopotamian or Greek beliefs and archetypes, despite popular belief, you have to sort of go into the weeds here. You can defer to people like Dr. Bart Ehrman. He doesn't really go too much into the Greek mythology. However, I think Dr. Michael Douglas, I think is his name. He's a person, I think he's perhaps a bit more mythicist, which is a term that is given to people that believe the whole Jesus Christ thing was, I think, mythological in its nature. But he just wanted to, and I think his name is Joshua Bowen, I think is his name. He's another Dr. Joshua Bowen, who's an Assyriologist. And he goes into the, in-depth origins of, the Bible, the stories, how, the flood of Gilgamesh, I believe, is the inspiration for the flood in the Bible. And these civilizations are a lot older than what is, given within the Hebrew Bible as to when it was written. And a lot of the scribes that wrote within that book were, in fact, Roman or Greek in origin. So it would make sense. And when you consider that their society was the governing force upon the Israelites, it makes incredible sense that a lot of their beliefs were things that were adopted, some could say appropriated to be fair, or stolen from these other types of belief systems or religions of that nature. It's incredibly distracting, I'm sorry. And so when you discover that a lot of what you believe in, a lot of what you like are stories that were taken, transformed, or twisted from something else of a completely different form, it can leave you lacking in your power, because then you become unsure of where you actually get your power from and what that power is. Your understanding of that nature, of that truth, it sort of, throws you off and it challenges your reality. And I feel as though when I was listening to, for example, and I love them very much, the Red Text podcast, which is why I sort of brought this up. They had someone that came in, a friend of the show, who is a person that's been talking about the origins of Christ, or believe the beliefs that surround him. And so if you're a, Christian or Catholic practitioner when it comes to the magical sphere, when you learn about these things, the unsureness, how, the book that you rely upon, your things, isn't exactly truthful in what it's telling you, or perhaps it's an incredibly diluted source of your power, of your information. It affects your reality, and so then you're wondering, well, how does this affect my power? And sometimes it doesn't really, but your understanding behind it can be incredibly different, and I was hearing them talk about this, and I love them, Volga Lumiscente on Instagram. And I think the Mestizo Mystic on Instagram, I recommend all of you to sort of, check them out. I love their podcast because I love their candor, I love their attitude, their demeanor, but the information that they present is something that is very important for all of us to sort of, I think, go into, because it is an aspect of the occult that people don't really know or see too much. They are both, or at least I think Volga more. As a starting point, they were, Christian practitioners. They would rely Catholic, to be more specific. But they would rely upon the energies that they would receive from Mary, from Christ, their archetypes, their associations. I don't believe they work with angels too much, actually, but it was very intriguing to hear the perspective. I think their reactions to understanding this, and even they were very honest about it. But it's something that puts you into perspective. And so I feel as though this sort of affected them in a certain way that I'm saying this. It might not be it, but that's the feeling I get. I feel as though learning upon this, because I myself, practiced in those circles when I was here, because I was trying to figure things out. It can affect you on an incredibly spiritual level and a mental level, because the mental and the spiritual, as well as the emotional, are things that merge together and they form the reality we live in. If one is without the other, it can sort of warp our senses of reality. And so when you sort of discover these origins, these truths, to something that you perhaps weren't sure about, but you sort of, created in your mind, it sort of starts, hammering or challenging or I believe weakening the strength of your reality. And so these are things that I believe practitioners have to keep in mind. A lot of what we practice, a lot of what we do are things that we have received, things that we have felt upon the result of us committing an action towards something. We put ourselves into something. We try to learn these the aspects of what we can, the effects it does to the body, the mind, the spirit, how we try to connect to something, how we see ourselves, how we see the reality. I myself am aware, and this is truthful, I try to base my practices on things that are a bit of both. I try to not drift from reality, not drift from truth, but also see how we can compare how it can be used for something spiritual. Like, for example, how I sort of see everyone living, at least for the most part, as being, beings of energy, because we absolutely do have energy, something you can detect with scientific and mundane instruments. And so understanding that there are other things that rely upon energy, that are affected by energy, and seeing as how we are both different types of energies, and there's a way for us to sort of bridge that gap and allow transference of one energy into the other. And then sort of manifesting the energies that then live in a different realm of perception, or perhaps of existence, that can then affect other things that we cannot see, to then affect us in the mundane realm, in the mundane aspects of our lifestyle. So yes, that's how I see sort of things. And so it's cemented in reality, in truth as well, but it has that tiny bit of a leniency on the things we're not exactly sure about, things that we can explain, because we have to leave room for that, because we don't know everything. It's impossible to know everything. We're not really equipped to do so, at least at this moment in time. But when it comes to the cracks within the walls of our reality, we need to understand what sort of things are keeping us from it, and what things that, can sort of welcome us into this sort of new type of existence, this new type of reality. The reason why so many practices exist is because there's so many different types of realities, so many different types of perceptions as to how those realities relate to one another and how they work in the real realm. So when you're working on things like, a Christian aspect with a more pagan aspect, perhaps a mix of both, or something entirely alien, it is important to understand that, your reality can affect your practice. Not the other way around. A practice cannot really affect the reality. Your perception of your practice on the reality can change, but the reality and what we live in is what affects the practice, because it is something that, it's something that, I don't want to say it's real and it affects us. Let me just give an example, okay? If you're going to, divulge yourself into something where, you're trying to utilize the energies of the oceans and stuff, you can't really do so if there's no ocean. You know what I'm saying? If you live on a planet where there's no water and you want to work with the energy of water, your perception of the energy of water is not really going to work, because you have no real frame of reference. You have no, that's what I'm saying. You don't have no real integrity. So to understand something, you need to be able to get to know something. But you can't get to know something if the thing isn't there, if it's not real. So what you're doing is that you're essentially projecting your idea of this thing as though it was real, as though it is present. And you're sort of trying to sort of make this thing exist to sort of, give you the energy, or help you receive the energy to then affect the world around you. There are those, for example, like myself in some aspects, that, rely upon the natural energies for things like the craft. And this, I feel, can be something that is, backed by various sciences, backed by several mundane methods. We are aware the elements exist. We know water is there. We know earth is there. We know how the water is affected by the energy of the moon, by the energy of the earth itself. We understand fire. We know fire has its own energy, how it is energy. The sun, how the sun affects everything on here, how without the sun we wouldn't have life. Without the sun, the moon wouldn't light at night. Without the sun, I am somewhat of a devotee, but for very realistic reasons. And so I understand that the sun itself, as an example, is an incredibly powerful entity that is capable of destroying us. It has immense power, things that we can't really tap into completely, but we have been able to utilize the energy to power houses, to power cars. It's responsible for growing the plants that nurture us and give us our food. Even animals that live in the ocean rely upon the sun for the light. A lot of our lives were affected by this great being, this thing of energy that absolutely exists. So it is cemented in reality. And so I'm trying to utilize that energy for my daily life. If the sun has been shown to, give you, benefits in your physical health, and it gives you the nutrients you need, your vitamins, and it helps your skin out, but too much exposure and harsh exposure to that energy can be detrimental to the health. Ancient civilization used to reveal the sun as a being or as a god, and in some aspects it is, because a god in that understanding is capable of things like creation, of nurturing. It has the power to, put things into creation, into life, but also has the power to destroy. The sun fits a lot of those qualifications. And so it makes sense for people to revere this, what we see as a mundane form of energy, as an entity unto itself, as a god of some kind that has understanding, that has knowledge, that has power, and it absolutely does. But, our perception of what that energy is, we haven't been able to go close to see if the sun is sentient or if it has able to anything else. Based on how we observe it on a mundane level, it doesn't appear to be anything more than a ball of gas. But on a spiritual level, perhaps in a different plane of existence or a different form of perception, if we're able to see the invisible rays or perhaps the influence this thing has, or what else is affected, in an invisible light, like how there's things like dark matter, I believe, or negative matter, or energy, or whatever the hell it's called. These are things that are real. These are physical objects, apparently, but that the sun cannot reveal. But we see that there's sort of like this invisible aspect, it's I have to do more research about, but it's something that exists that we can actually see through the effects of the sun, through the light, because the light is hitting something. It's sort of passing through something that has a form, like shining light through glass. Glass is something that is there, it's physical, but you can see right through it, and it can obscure or twist your vision. Something like that exists on a broader scale out into the void of space. And so these things are real. So we are discovering a bit more about our universe, about, who we are, how we are affected by this. But, that in itself, learning these truths about it, I can then turn and empower my practice, because I'm trying to use what is there realistically, what can affect what I can see, what I can feel, and the beings that are associated to that sort of thing are the things that I try to communicate with in order to achieve a better, understanding. Because, it's, when you have deities that represent the sun, like Apollo, or you can even things like Lucifer, when you want to go to a different religion or things like that, like I think, I used to get more into it, but like the sun gods of the South Americas and even other places, many countless cultures have sort of, given themselves to, honoring this thing, to worshipping this thing, because it is capable of so much and does so much for us, without any sort of thanks, in a very selfless way. But it has the incredible power, unmistakably, to destroy almost everything in this system. So we have to sort of respect that power, and to sort of, and the thing is, we had to understand how that being works in order for us to utilize its energy for things like light, for things like power that we have here. And so it's something that's a lot more, it's a lot more solid. And so I don't want to diss anyone else, any practitioners, but you have to consider the fact that, upon learning the origins of perhaps certain deities you worship, how, a lot of what we think about could just be tricks to spirits, or perhaps could be other energies we sort of give these names to, or perhaps these energies or the spirits that we communicate with are actual beings, but the origins of what we know about them could be completely mistaken. The god Apollo, for example, despite the problematic things you can see in the mythology, could be something completely different that's not really described in there. This could just be stories that were given to their belief around it, to what they understood from it. I highly doubt they interviewed the gods to even give a mythology. A lot of what we rely on for the things like the gods are things that man has written down. So whether or not it is true, we're sort of just, putting up to maybe it is. And so we try to, see these certain things, and like I guess like the plants that are associated with it, the metals, the materials that are associated with it, things like Mars or whatever, how it's associated with, strategy and everything else, and how the energies we can feel from these sort of things, and it can be very complicated. But when it comes to things like weaknesses, understanding that what you believed in might not be what it really is, learning that, out of the ideas that you have, which you thought were true, that were working in your craft, aren't really what you thought it to be, can absolutely affect it. Because believe it or not, and you would be lying if you told me that the truths you found out about your belief system being false will not affect your life or your practice. I highly doubt that, because then it sort of delegitimizes your practice. I guess the integrity or the efficacy of your practice. But if your practice is working, even though you're doing something different, then perhaps there's something else there that isn't what you thought it was. Or perhaps there may not be no deity, but perhaps you are the source of that power, which, can be even more rewarding in that aspect. When you discover that you yourself are that power, that strength that affected the change, the outcomes in your life, that affected the change in nature around it. A barren wasteland can be home to many a creature. But, the things that we're able to do with the elements that are available, we can turn it into a lush landscape. And some people have done this sort of thing. A single person, despite what some people may think, given enough time and resources, can make something, apparently barren or waste with something that is very plentiful and very lush, But it requires time. But they have the power to do so. A lot of the changes you seek in your life are not going to be done for you. And they can't be in some aspects. But that means that you have the power then to affect the change, to affect your own reality. If you're thirsty, go get a drink. Go get food. We don't really have the capabilities of just speaking things into existence and feeding us. We have to go out and get these things. We have to show initiative. We have to be assertive in our nature into what we do. And so when it comes to things of practice, things like weaknesses, when you find out that something has affected your practice and then is, not really what you thought it was, or perhaps gives you the sort of, different aspect, this different look, use that moment to then, rethink, well, where did I get this power from? Where did I get this strength? And then try to seek it out even more. And if you find out that perhaps it was you the entire time, it gives you more reason to then put yourself first more, to acquire what you want more, to, do things. So, the world is your oyster. You can do anything you want. But, in a more practical sense, when things like weaknesses come up, just for you to, I guess, understand it a bit better. Let's say, for example, back where I come from, we have a lot of things like the elemental dueling grounds, where we try to, that's what we call it, really. And they're just dueling grounds, but the reason why I use elemental is because it is a type of thing where we're trying to use the forces of nature that are already available to us, and sort of just borrowing from it and then using it. Sort of like a catch and throw. It's how we are sort of utilizing the energy that is around us for our own benefit. Farmers use it to, like irrigation, to water the fields, to keep the things going. How the air, how it sort of, goes through an air conditioner or a fan, it's sort of, absorbing the air that's around it and pushing it out. It works in a similar nature, but in my realm, it's something a bit more magical. So if you have a person that's more proclivity to fire magic, understand the weaknesses to fire. Fire cannot exist without air. People think water, no. The absence of air, because air or wind is what fuels the fire. If you take those things out, the fire's not really going to last as long. You can have a fire in a void, but it's not going to last very long without air. It needs something to burn, or something that has oxygen within it, or anything else. It has a secondary source of fuel. But if you're fighting someone, like even Pokemon, for example, a fire type is weak to water in most instances. Grass is weak to fire, unless if it's wet. And then water would be weak to things like lightning. Or can even be weak to grass or ground, because grass can absorb water. It's learning the weaknesses and learning how to get around those sort of things that can help you in your craft and your daily life, and then how you sort of utilize your magic. And these are sort of things that I feel as though people need to, I guess, understand a bit more. If you find out that, Freya is who she says she is, how Loki isn't, who he says he is, how Lucifer isn't, how Jesus isn't, how Mary isn't, how how Buddha isn't. That will have an effect on you because you have a sort of a trauma associated to it. But then your understanding is what's affected, as well as your reality. But it's sort of understanding, well, what sort of other truths can I find? What power was there really that I was drawing upon? Understanding that and using that knowledge that you then gained to then give you more leverage, give you more power. Perhaps the thing you were communicating with doesn't really care for the name you gave it. But the fact that you were giving it something and you established a relationship is what mattered. And so communication, relationship is essentially the source of your power, of your strength. So then you can use that. Then you can also use that for your mundane aspects, which is what we see. And I think that I should probably go into a different video as to, I guess, the best spirits to work with. And contrary to popular belief, it may not be the ones you're thinking about, or perhaps ones you thought about. But I will probably definitely a really good subject there. If you're interested, stay tuned because I will definitely be talking about him. But I hope that I at least gave a proper example as to what I mean about the weaknesses in our magic and our craft. If you have a weakness, maybe you needed something with music, maybe to give that sort of boost of energy or perhaps help you ground. Maybe you needed, a type of a plant to help be that component you were missing to get that desired effect. Maybe you were missing perhaps a person. Maybe you needed more energy, perhaps more input from another person to make these things happen. Or maybe what you needed was maybe positive reinforcement because you doubted yourself too much. All of these things can affect the practices that we do, whether you're in the mundane or whether you're in the magical. All of these concepts are things that we have to understand because they will not only better us as practitioners, but better us as people, as individuals. Okay? So, without further more delay, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so happy that all of you sort of tuned in for this, and I apologize for the sort of infrequency of these uploads. But like I said, I have a mundane life to live. And these are sort of concepts that I sort of have to think about constantly, that I try to, incorporate in whatever practices that I'm doing and whatever, life that I'm living. And I urge all of you to do the same. Understand your weaknesses, understand your values, because all of these things will sort of, help shape your reality and then shape the person you are to be. I'm so happy all of you are here. I urge kindness, understanding, and power. Okay? Do not surrender your sovereignty lightly. Learn how to empower yourselves and others around you. Understand that you are not alone in this, that there is community for you, behind you, and that there are people out there that do care for you, even if it may not be the people that you thought counted the most. I urge all of you to please practice in safety, whether it's sex or magic. If you have a brother locked in a cage, let him out once in a while to get some breath of fresh air. If you have a cat that is annoying you, ignore it and then see what happens. Okay? I'm not going to do the whole cat-dog thing. Maybe in a later video, not now. My concepts and beliefs about them, how they could work. And perhaps a possible story or book I was thinking about writing about it. So I'm kind of excited. Enjoy yourselves. Life is short for us. And so we don't know what's going to happen. But I urge all of you to, live your life to the fullest as you possibly can. Whatever weakness is out there, whatever can hamper your belief, your reality, understand it. Twist it upon itself, perhaps. If you want to reject reality altogether, you can do so. And see how it affects your life and the others around you. But if not, use it as a source of power, as a source of strength, as a source of inspiration, and see how it affects your life. Okay? So, to my students, the exams weren't too bad. I really hope all of you do a little bit better. But not bad. Not bad at all. Where was he? You guys, I'm not acting like as if you guys are here. Simon, your question, I do, because I'm still thinking about how the proper way to answer you. You might have to meet me after class, I think, on Wednesday. And then don't forget that Wednesday is the liminal day of the week. We're going to be doing some, small practices, our daily, grounding in the morning, and then our release when the nighttime comes. So do that for nighttime courses for all of these, who want to come up. It's free for all the students to go to. Sarah, don't do that again. You know what you did, don't lie about it. And oh my god, forgetting her name. Their name, I'm sorry. Whatever. I'll let them know. But until next time, have a good one. And don't blow up your house, please. Because I don't want to go over there and fix it for you. Goodbye.